Clara Whitmore pressed her hand flat against her father's door and listened to the sound of her own life being sold. A gold coin struck wood, then another. Then a voice she had trusted her entire 19 years said, "She cannot give heirs, but she is young enough to be useful." She did not cry. She had learned long ago that tears cost too much in a house that valued nothing freely given. If this story moves you, subscribe and leave your city in the comments. I want to see how far Clara's story travels. The summer of 1815 came down hard on the Pennsylvania frontier, the kind of heat that pressed into your chest and made breathing feel like work. But inside Whitmore House, Clara had long since stopped noticing the weather. She had learned to notice other things: the pitch of her father's voice behind closed doors, the particular silence her mother carried into a room, the way the household staff found reasons to be somewhere else whenever the family gathered. She noticed all of those things now. She stood in the hallway outside her father's study, her back flat to the wall, her fingers curled at her sides. She could hear two voices: her father's, low and deliberate, the voice he used when money was involved, and another, smooth, unhurried, the voice of a man who had come a long way and did not intend to leave without what he came for. "The fever left her compromised," her father said. "The physician confirmed it years ago. She will not produce children." A pause. "That does not diminish the agreement," the other voice said. "It should," Edward Whitmore said. "By rights, it should." "Mr. Whitmore," the voice sharpened slightly, "the agreement was not made on the basis of her fertility. It was made on the basis of your debt, which, I will remind you, is considerable." Clara pressed her hand harder against the wall. She had known about the debt for some time. She had overheard that too, in the same hallway, in the same way, piece by piece, over the course of the last 2 years. The Whitmore estate had been profitable once. It was not profitable anymore. Bad harvests, bad loans, a series of decisions her father made with the confidence of a man who had never yet been wrong, until he was, catastrophically, all at once. She had not known she was part of the solution. She pushed the door open. Her father looked up from his desk. He was a tall man, broad through the shoulders, with gray beginning to thread through his dark hair. He had the face of a man who had once been handsome and knew it, and had decided that knowing it was sufficient. Beside him stood a man Clara did not recognize, well-dressed, carrying a leather satchel, with the air of someone accustomed to delivering news that other people found unpleasant. "Clara," her father said. His voice did not change. "This is not the time." "I heard enough," she said, from the hallway. The man with the satchel looked at her with a kind of neutral appraisal, the way a man might look at a horse before deciding whether to buy it. She returned his gaze steadily, because she had learned that looking away gave people permission to dismiss you entirely. "What agreement?" she asked. Her father stood up. "Clara, what agreement?" she said again. The man with the satchel glanced at her father, then back at her. "Miss Whitmore," he said, with the careful courtesy of someone who did not actually feel what he was performing, "I represent Mr. Nathaniel Hale of Hale Ridge. Your father entered into a financial arrangement with Mr. Hale's estate some months ago. The terms of that arrangement include—" "She doesn't need the details," her father said. "She's standing in my father's study asking for them," Clara said. "I think that means she does." The man paused. He looked at her father again. Edward Whitmore sat back down slowly. He folded his hands on the desk. He did not look at her when he spoke. "You'll be leaving tomorrow," he said. "The contract is already signed. Your things will be packed tonight." Clara did not move. "Leaving to go where?" "To Hale Ridge." "To do what?" Her father said nothing. "Father," her voice was quiet. Quiet in the way that comes after you have decided that screaming would only prove something the other person already believes about you. To do what? To be useful, he said, in whatever capacity Mr. Hale requires. The room went very still. Clara looked at the man with the satchel. He was studying the floor. She looked at her father. He was studying his hands. "You sold me," she said. "I arranged a situation. You sold me." She said it again, not louder, not softer, just the same, flat and clear and without decoration. "Because I can't give you grandchildren. Because I'm not worth keeping." Her father's jaw tightened. "You're being dramatic." "Am I?" It wasn't a question. "Clara," he looked up at her then, and there was something in his face that might have been discomfort, might have been guilt. And she watched it move across his features, like a cloud that passes without leaving rain. "This is the best outcome for everyone. Hale is a man of means. You will have a roof over your head, food, protection, more than most women in your position could hope for." "My position," she said. "You are 19 years old. You have no prospects. You have no—" He stopped. "Say it," she said. "Go ahead and say it." He looked away again. "Say that I have no value," she said. "Say it plainly, Father. You've thought it long enough. The least you could do is be honest." "I am being honest," he said quietly. "That is what this is." She stood there for a moment longer, long enough to make sure he felt it, the weight of what he had just said, and what it cost her to hear it. Then she turned and walked out of the room, and she closed the door behind her without slamming it, because she refused to give him even that. Her mother was in the parlor. Louisa Whitmore sat by the window with her needlework in her lap, the kind of woman who had constructed her entire life around the appearance of composure. She was beautiful in the way that cold things often are, precise, contained, without warmth. She looked up when Clara came in, and her expression did not change. "You heard," she said. "I heard," Clara said. "Then you understand." "I understand that you agreed to this." Her mother set down the needlework. "I understand what is practical, Clara. That is not the same thing as agreeing." "You didn't stop it." "There was nothing to stop." Her mother's voice was perfectly even. "The decision was made. The circumstances required it." "The circumstances." Clara crossed her arms. "You mean me. I am the circumstance. You are a young woman with no prospects, and the limitation that cannot be corrected," her mother said. "Your father's estate is in serious difficulty." "What would you have had us do?" "I would have had you not sell me to a stranger." "Nathaniel Hale is not a stranger. He is a man of property and standing, a veteran, a widower. He has a young son who—" "I don't care who he is," Clara said. "He bought me." "He did not." Her mother stopped, reconsidered. "The arrangement is more complex than that." "Is it?" Clara said. "Tell me how." Her mother picked the needlework back up. "You'll understand when you get there." "Mother," Clara stepped closer. "Look at me. Please, look at me." Her mother did not look up. "I was sick for 2 years," Clara said. "I nearly died. I lay in that bed upstairs and I nearly died, and you sat beside me and you said it didn't matter. You said you didn't care about heirs or prospects or any of it. You just wanted me to live." Her voice stayed steady. She was proud of that. "Was that true? When you said it, was any part of it true?" Her mother's hands stilled on the fabric. "I wanted you to live," she said quietly. "And now?" A long pause. "Now I want you to be taken care of," her mother said. "That is the most I can offer you. I am sorry that it looks the way it looks." Clara waited, but nothing else came. She left the parlor and went upstairs to her room, and she sat on the edge of her bed, and she pressed both hands flat on her knees, and she breathed. She was not going to fall apart. Not here. Not in this house, where falling apart would only confirm everything they already believed about her. She was going to pack her things, and she was going to leave. And whatever waited for her at Hale Ridge, she was going to face it standing up. The morning came the way bad mornings always do. Too fast, too bright, indifferent to the fact that anything was wrong. Clara was dressed before anyone else was awake. She had packed what she could into a single trunk. 2 dresses, her mother's Bible that she had taken without asking and felt no guilt about, a small journal she had kept since she was 12, a photograph of herself and her younger brother Thomas, who had died of the same fever that had taken her fertility and left the rest of her standing. She had packed methodically, which was the only way she knew how to do things that hurt. She carried the trunk to the top of the stairs herself, because she was not going to ask for help in this house. Not today. Her father appeared at the bottom of the staircase. He looked like he hadn't slept. She was glad. "The carriage will be here within the hour," he said. "I know," she said. "Clara, don't." She picked up the trunk and started down the stairs. He stepped aside. She set it down by the front door and straightened and looked at him. "I want you to know something," she said. "I want you to know that I understand exactly what you've done. Not the version of it where it's practical and necessary and for my own good. The real version. The one where you decided that I was less valuable than your debt. And you acted on that decision, and you will spend the rest of your life finding ways to believe you were right. I know that's what happened." His jaw was tight. "Clara, I'm not angry," she said, and she meant it, which surprised her. "I think I should be. I think most people would be. But I'm not. I'm just finished. With this house, with trying to matter in it, with hoping that one of you would look at me and see something worth keeping." She picked up her small traveling bag and hung it over her arm. "I hope the money was worth it." She turned away from him and did not turn back. The man who came for her was not the same man with the satchel. He was older, quieter, with the weathered look of someone who spent most of his life outdoors. He introduced himself as Gideon, Mr. Hale's foreman, and he took her trunk without being asked and loaded it into the back of a plain black carriage without ceremony. "Long drive?" Clara asked. "Half a day," he said. "Maybe more, depending on the road." "Is Mr. Hale—" she started. "He's at the ridge," Gideon said. "Waiting." She climbed into the carriage. Her mother appeared at the front door of the house as they prepared to leave. She stood on the top step with her hands clasped in front of her. She did not call out. She did not wave. She just stood there, watching. Clara looked at her through the carriage window for a moment. Then she looked away first. The carriage moved through the morning, through towns and stretches of frontier road, through clusters of homesteads and patches of forest so dense the light turned green and then disappeared entirely. Clara sat with her hands folded in her lap and thought about what she knew. She knew Nathaniel Hale was a widower. She knew he had a young son. She knew he had served in the war and come back to his estate, and that he had more land than neighbors and more silence than company. She knew that he had agreed to take her, whatever that meant, and that the agreement had been made to settle a debt that had nothing to do with her and everything to do with her at the same time. She did not know what he intended. She had run through the possibilities in her head the night before, lying awake in her room for the last time. The least terrible version, that she would serve as housekeeper, governess, general household help, useful in the way a person could be useful without being erased. The more terrible versions she did not allow herself to linger on, because they required her to believe that her father had done something worse than she was already prepared to believe. She hoped for the least terrible version. She did not count on it. It was afternoon when the carriage finally slowed. She felt it before she saw anything. The change in the road, the way Gideon's shoulders shifted on the driver's seat. She leaned toward the window. The land around her was open and rolling, fence lines running into the distance, fields that stretched farther than she could see. A house rose ahead of them. Not a manor, not anything like what she had imagined, but a working house, a serious house, built for durability rather than impression. A man stood outside. He was tall, taller than she expected, and broad, the kind of build that came from labor rather than ambition. He wore a plain shirt, sleeves rolled to the elbows, and he stood with his hands at his sides and watched the carriage come without moving. His hair was dark, touched with early gray at the temples. His face was the kind of face that had been through something and had not entirely recovered, though it had decided to keep going regardless. Gideon brought the carriage to a stop. The man did not approach immediately. He waited. Clara opened the carriage door herself before Gideon could come around to do it. She stepped down onto the dirt, straightened her dress, and looked at Nathaniel Hale across the distance between them. He looked back at her. "Miss Whitmore," he said finally. His voice was lower than she expected, quieter. "Mr. Hale," she said. A pause stretched between them like a rope pulled tight. "You had a long ride," he said. "I did." "Are you hungry?" She blinked. Of all the things she had prepared herself to hear, that was not among them. Yes, she said. "I suppose I am." He nodded once. "Then come inside." He turned toward the house. She didn't move immediately. He looked back over his shoulder. "Miss Whitmore," he said, "I'm not going to explain myself in the yard. Come inside, eat something, and then we'll talk. You deserve to hear it plainly, and I'd rather give you the chance to sit down when you do." Something in his tone, not warmth exactly, but gravity, the particular weight of a man who meant what he said, made her take a breath. She picked up her bag and followed him. Behind her, Gideon began unloading her trunk, and she did not look back at the road, and she did not allow herself to imagine her mother standing at that front door. She walked into Nathaniel Hale's house, and whatever came next, she was going to face it the same way she had faced everything else, with her back straight and her chin level, and the quiet, stubborn certainty that she was still, despite everything that had been done to her, a person worth reckoning with. The screen door swung shut behind her, and the summer afternoon closed around the house like a fist. And Clara Whitmore understood, for the first time in her 19 years, that she was completely on her own, and that this, terrifying as it was, might also be the first honest thing that had ever happened to her. The kitchen smelled like wood smoke, and something savory that Clara couldn't name. And she stood in the doorway for a moment because she didn't know whether she was supposed to sit, or stand, or ask, or wait. And the not knowing was its own particular kind of humiliation after a day that had already taken more from her than she intended to give. A woman appeared from around the corner of the room, stout, gray-haired, with the brisk movements of someone who had never once wasted a motion in her life. She looked at Clara the way you look at a package that's arrived slightly damaged, but still worth opening. "Sit down before you fall down," the woman said. "You look like you've been hauled across the county." "I have been," Clara said. "Then sit." Clara sat. The woman set a bowl in front of her and did not offer her name and did not ask for Clara's, which was somehow a relief. Nathaniel Hale stood across the room with his arms folded, watching Clara with an expression she could not read. Not unkind, not warm, something in between that she didn't have a word for yet. "Her name is May," he said, nodding toward the woman. "She runs the house, has for 12 years. May made a sound that indicated she found this introduction unnecessary. "Mr. Hale," Clara said carefully, setting down her spoon. "You said you'd explain plainly." "I did." "I'd like you to start." He pulled out a chair across from her and sat down, and he put his hands flat on the table. A deliberate gesture, she thought. The gesture of a man who wanted to signal that he had nothing hidden in them. "Your father borrowed money against the estate 3 years ago," he said, "from a business acquaintance of mine. When that man died, the debt passed to me as part of an estate settlement. I didn't seek it. I wasn't looking for leverage over Edward Whitmore or his family." He held her gaze. "But I had it." "And you used it," Clara said. "I used it to get you out of there," he said. "Yes." She stared at him. "Why?" He was quiet for a moment. "Because I know what Edward Whitmore is. I know what that house is. And I know what happens to a young woman when her family decides she's cost more than she's worth." The words landed so precisely that she had to look away. "You don't know me," she said. "No," he agreed. "I don't." "Then why?" "Because it was the right thing to do," he said. "That's the whole of it, Miss Whitmore. I'm not looking for gratitude. I'm not looking for anything from you. You're not here as a servant, and you're not here as anything else. You're here because you needed somewhere to be, and I had the means to provide it." Clara looked at him for a long time. She was looking for the lie, the way she had learned to look for lies in her father's face, the slight shift of the eyes, the too careful arrangement of the features. She didn't find one. "What does that mean practically?" she asked. "Day to day. What does this look like?" "It looks like you having your own room," he said. "Your own time. If you want to help May in the house, she won't turn you away. If you want to work the grounds, Gideon'll find something. If you want to sit on the porch and read every day for the rest of the year, that's your right." "You're serious," she said. "Miss Whitmore, I don't say things I don't mean. It's a waste of everyone's time." She picked up her spoon again. She needed something to do with her hands. "My father," she said slowly, "told me you needed a wife." Something moved across Nathaniel Hale's face. "Your father," he said, "told you what made the arrangement easier to explain." "So you don't." "I have no interest in remarrying," he said. "I had a wife. She was a good woman. She's gone." The words came out the way you carry something heavy, carefully, so you don't drop it in front of people. "My son Samuel is 10 years old, and he needs stability, not another person cycling through his life because it suits someone else's interests." "Then what do you need?" Clara asked. He looked at her steadily. "Peace," he said. "Just peace. That's all I've wanted for 3 years." She nodded slowly. She understood peace as an aspiration, though she had never lived anywhere quiet enough to know what it actually felt like. "All right," she said. "All right," he said. May slapped 2 more bowls down on the table with the energy of a woman deeply uninterested in whatever emotional reckoning was happening at her kitchen table. And that was somehow exactly what the moment needed. Clara ate. For the first time in a very long time, nobody watched her do it. She had been at Hale Ridge for 3 days when Samuel found her. She had heard him, of course, the way children make themselves known through sound before they make themselves known through presence. Footsteps on the staircase. The particular creak of a door pushed open, then immediately let go. She had been sitting in the small room off the hallway that Nathaniel had told her she could use however she liked, reading her journal with the intention of adding to it and finding, each time she picked up a pen, that she had nothing she was ready to say yet. The boy appeared in the doorway like he'd been pushed there. He was small for 10, with his father's dark coloring, and a watchful quality around the eyes that Clara recognized immediately because she had worn it herself for years. The look of a child who has learned to read rooms before entering them. "You're Clara," he said. "I am," she said. "You're Samuel. My father told me not to bother you." "He did?" "He said you'd been through a hard time and needed quiet." Samuel tipped his head slightly. "Are you bothered right now?" "No," she said. "I'm not." He came 2 steps farther into the room. "May says you ate everything she put in front of you on the first night." "I was hungry." "May says that's a good sign." He said this with the authority of someone who regards May's opinions as binding. "She said the last woman who came through here pushed her food around her plate for 2 weeks and then left." Clara blinked. "There was another woman?" "My aunt," Samuel said. "Father's sister. She came after my mother died to help with the house. She didn't like it here." He said this without judgment, as a simple report of fact. "She said it was too quiet." "What do you think?" Clara asked. He considered this seriously. "I think it's the right amount of quiet," he said. "There's a difference between empty quiet and real quiet." She looked at him. 10 years old, and he already knew that. She thought about what kind of house, what kind of loss, teaches a child to make that distinction. "You're right," she said. "There is." He nodded once, satisfied, and then retreated back down the hallway, and Clara sat with a journal in her lap and did not open it. Because for the first time in 3 days, she felt something shift very slightly inside her chest. Something that was not happiness exactly, but was adjacent to it, the way a window being cracked open is adjacent to fresh air. It was on the 5th day that the first piece of trouble arrived. It came in the shape of a man named Richard Calloway, and he came without warning, riding up the lane on a horse that was too fine for the frontier, and wearing a coat that made the same statement. Clara was outside. She had taken to walking the fence line in the mornings, not for any practical reason, simply because she could go where she wanted, and that was still new enough to feel like something. And she saw him before he saw her. He was perhaps 50, broad in the chest with a kind of face that had probably been handsome once and had since acquired a different quality, something harder and more acquisitive. He reined his horse in when he noticed her. "Well," he said, looking down at her, "you must be the Whitmore girl." She met his gaze evenly. "I must be," she said. "Richard Calloway." He didn't dismount. "My land borders Hales on the eastern side." "Mr. Calloway," she said. "Word travels fast in small country," he said pleasantly. "People are talking." "People usually are." "Nathaniel Hale taking in a young woman he purchased from her family?" He smiled, and the smile did not involve his eyes in any meaningful way. "You can imagine the kind of talk." Clara kept her voice flat and steady. "I can," she said, "and I imagine most of it says more about the people doing the talking than about anyone at Hale Ridge." Something flickered behind his eyes. Not anger. Recalibration. "Sharp," he said. "He picked a sharp one." "He didn't pick me for my edges," she said, "and I don't think he sent you to take inventory of them. Was there something you needed, Mr. Calloway?" He looked at her for a moment longer than was polite. The look of a man who is deciding how much of what he's thinking to show. "Just being neighborly," he said. "You tell Nathaniel I came by." "I will," she said. He turned his horse and rode back down the lane without hurrying, the way men ride when they want you to know that their leaving is their own decision and not yours. Clara stood and watched him go, and felt the particular cold that has nothing to do with temperature. She told Nathaniel at supper. She said it plainly, the same way she'd learned to receive plain things, without embellishment, without theater. Just the facts, laid out in order. Nathaniel's expression did not change while she spoke, but his hands, which had been loose on the table, slowly stilled. "What exactly did he say?" he asked. "That word travels fast. That people are talking." She looked at him. He smiled the whole time. That was the worst part. "Calloway smiles when he's calculating," Nathaniel said. "He's been calculating something on this property for 2 years." "What does he want?" Nathaniel was quiet for a moment. He looked at the table, and then he looked at her, and she could see him deciding how much to say. Not because he wanted to deceive her, she thought, but because he was a man who had spent years keeping his problems on his own side of the fence. "This land," he said finally. "Hale Ridge borders the best water access in this part of the county. Calloway's been buying up everything around it, piece by piece. This property is the only one left that he doesn't have, and he knows that without it, the rest of what he's built is worth significantly less." "He wants to buy you out?" "He's made 3 offers," Nathaniel said, "each one lower than the last. Because each time I refused, he seemed to decide that I'd be more desperate eventually." His jaw tightened. He was wrong. "And now I'm here," Clara said slowly. "And now you're here," he agreed. "And he'll use whatever he can use." She absorbed that. "I'm sorry," she said. "I didn't consider that my being here would complicate—" "Don't apologize for existing," he said. It came out with more force than he seemed to intend, and he paused. "You didn't create Calloway. He was a problem before you arrived." "I made you easier to attack," she said. "You made me harder, actually." He looked at her directly, and there was something steady in it, unapologetic. The look of a man who says what he means, even when what he means is complicated. A man with nothing to protect can be picked apart one piece at a time. A man who's protecting something has a reason to hold the line. She did not know what to do with that, so she said nothing. May came through with coffee, set it down without comment, left. Samuel had already gone to bed. "What will he do?" Clara asked, finally. "He'll push," Nathaniel said. "He always pushes. But push has to become shove before anything actually happens. And I've been waiting for that move for 2 years." "He said people are talking." "They'll talk louder before they quiet down." He picked up his coffee. "Miss Whitmore, can I ask you something directly?" "You can try," she said. "Are you afraid of what people say?" She thought about her mother, sitting in the parlor with needlework in her lap, arranging her entire life around what the neighbors thought. She thought about the years she had spent making herself quiet and small so that the Whitmore name would not suffer from association with a daughter who couldn't give heirs. "I used to be," she said. "I spent a very long time being afraid of it." She met his eyes. "But they said what they were going to say about me long before I got here. I don't think there's anything left for them to take." He looked at her for a long moment. Then he nodded, once, slowly, the way a man nods when he hears something that recalibrates something else. "All right," he said. "All right," she said. It became their word, she realized, the word that stood in for everything else they didn't yet have language for. She lay awake that night and listened to the house settle around her. The small sounds of wood and wind and distant animals. And she thought about Richard Calloway's smile, and the way he had looked at her, like she was a variable he was already working into an equation. She thought about what Nathaniel had said, that she was harder to attack than easier. She thought about her father's study, and the sound of coins and her name being crossed out of the family record like a clerical error. She thought about all the ways she had been reduced in her 19 years. Daughter, patient, burden, debt, transaction. And she pressed her hand flat against the mattress and breathed. She was still here. That had to count for something. She was still here, and she was still thinking. And whatever Richard Calloway was planning, he had made one significant miscalculation. He had looked at her and seen a liability. He did not yet understand that she had already survived everything she was supposed to be destroyed by, and that made her, in ways she was only beginning to understand, exactly the wrong woman to underestimate. The trouble with small country, Clara had learned in the 2 weeks since her arrival, was that everyone knew your name before you knew theirs, and they had already decided what it meant. She found this out the first time Gideon drove her into Hadley's Creek for supplies. It was a practical trip, nothing more. May had written a list in her small, cramped handwriting and pressed it into Clara's hand and said, "You might as well learn where things are," which Clara understood to mean that she was being trusted with something and should not make a mess of it. She didn't make a mess of it, but she also couldn't ignore the way people looked at her. Not the open staring of the curious. Worse than that, the sideways look, the murmur behind a hand, the woman at the dry goods counter who smiled at her with her mouth while her eyes conducted a thorough and unflattering inventory. The blacksmith's wife who stopped her conversation entirely when Clara passed and did not resume it until Clara had gone by. She bought the things on May's list. She thanked the counter woman. She walked back to the wagon with her spine straight and her face neutral, and she climbed up beside Gideon and did not say a word about any of it. Gideon said nothing either, which she appreciated. He was a man who understood the value of silence. It was halfway back to the ridge when he spoke. "Don't let it eat at you," he said, without looking at her. "I wasn't planning to," she said. "Good." He adjusted the reins. "They talked when Mr. Hale came back from the war, too. Said he'd gone strange. Said the house would fall apart without Mrs. Hale." He paused. "The house didn't fall apart. He managed." "He more than managed," Gideon said. "He's a hard man to knock down. People don't always know what to do with that, so they talk instead." Clara considered this. "Do you think he knows how much they're saying?" "About you?" Gideon glanced at her sidelong. "He knows. He always knows. He just doesn't give it the attention it thinks it deserves." She thought about that the rest of the ride home. The idea of someone being so settled in themselves that other people's opinions simply could not find purchase. She wasn't there yet. She wasn't sure she knew how to get there, but she was beginning to understand it as a destination worth moving toward. It was May who told her about the letter. She came to find Clara 2 days later, moving with more urgency than usual, which, on May, registered as walking slightly faster and pressing her lips together more firmly than normal. "This came for you," May said, holding out a folded paper. "Ryder brought it from town this morning." Clara took it and looked at the handwriting on the front and felt the floor drop slightly beneath her. She knew that handwriting. She had seen it on household ledgers, on correspondence left open on desks, on the front of the family Bible before she'd taken it. Her mother. She opened it carefully. The letter was short. Her mother had never been a woman to waste words when a few precise ones would accomplish the same damage. "Clara, your father has received further communication regarding the terms of your arrangement. There are concerns about the legality of the original contract. Mr. Calloway has reached out to us directly. He believes there may be provisions your father did not fully disclose. You should know that the situation is more complicated than we led you to believe. Come home if you are able. L." Clara read it twice. Then she folded it and put it in her pocket and went to find Nathaniel. He was in the far barn with Gideon when she found him. Both of them bent over something mechanical that Clara didn't attempt to identify. She waited in the doorway. Nathaniel straightened and looked at her face and said something quiet to Gideon, who took one look at Clara and found somewhere else to be, with the efficiency of a man who had learned to read a room. "What happened?" Nathaniel said. She handed him the letter without preamble. He read it. She watched his face and saw the exact moment the words registered. A stillness that moved through him like a current, contained, controlled, but visible if you were paying attention. He folded the letter and handed it back. "He went to your family," he said. "He went to my family," she confirmed. "I didn't expect that," he said, and the admission cost him something. She could hear it. "I thought he'd come at me directly." "He came at what you can't defend as easily," she said. "He came at me." Nathaniel's jaw was tight. "The original contract your father signed. There were terms in it that I drew up specifically to protect you, to make your status here clear. Not as property, as a free person in voluntary residence." He stopped. "But your father may have signed things I don't know about, before he came to me." Clara felt the cold again, the same cold she'd felt watching Calloway ride away. "What kind of things?" "I don't know yet," he said. "That's what I need to find out." He looked at her directly. "I need you to trust me for a little while. Can you do that?" It was an honest question, not a command. That was the difference, she was learning, between this man and every other man who had ever asked anything of her. "I can try," she said. He almost smiled. "Fair enough," he said. Fair enough. What she did not tell him, not then, not yet, was what the end of the letter had really meant when she read it the second time. "Come home if you are able," not "come home because we miss you," not "come home because we were wrong." "Come home because the situation has become inconvenient, and your presence there is no longer solving the problem it was supposed to solve." Her mother had not written to offer her a reprieve. She had written to retrieve a piece on a board that had moved out of position. Clara was not a piece anymore. She had decided that much, somewhere between the carriage ride and her first conversation with May, and the moment Samuel had told her there was a difference between empty quiet and real quiet. She had decided it the way you decide things that were always true, not with a declaration, but with a recognition. She was not going back. The revelation came on a Wednesday. She knew it was Wednesday because May always made cornbread on Wednesday, and the smell of it had already reached the upstairs hallway when the sound of horses came up from the lane. Not one horse, 3. Clara came to the top of the staircase and heard Gideon's voice from below, and then another voice she recognized, and then, underneath it, the lowest, smoothest voice of all, Richard Calloway, stepping into Nathaniel Hale's house without waiting to be invited. She came down the stairs. Calloway was in the front room with two men she didn't know, both younger, both standing in the way that men stand when they're meant to look like a message rather than people. Nathaniel stood across from them. He had not invited anyone to sit, and no one had. Calloway looked at Clara when she came in. His expression was pleasant in that particular way she already despised. "Miss Whitmore," he said, "I was just about to ask after you." "Here I am," she said. She moved to stand beside Nathaniel, not behind him, beside him, and she felt him register it without moving. "This is a courtesy call," Calloway said, addressing Nathaniel. "I want to be clear about that. I have no interest in making difficulties for anyone." "Then don't," Nathaniel said. "I have in my possession," Calloway said, unhurried, reaching into his coat, "a document signed by Edward Whitmore 14 months ago, before he came to any agreement with you." He held out a folded paper. "It constitutes a prior claim on his daughter's situation. Specifically, it obligates the Whitmore family to arrange a marriage contract with my family in exchange for a debt settlement I personally extended to Whitmore at that time." The room was absolutely silent. Clara heard her own heartbeat. "He made a deal with you," she said, and she was proud of how level her voice was. "Before he made one with Mr. Hale." "He made several deals," Calloway said pleasantly. "Edward Whitmore is a man of considerable creativity when it comes to the same debt." He looked at Nathaniel. Which means, I'm afraid, that whatever you believe you arranged for Miss Whitmore may be complicated. Nathaniel took the document. He read it. He handed it to Clara, and she read it too. And she read her father's signature at the bottom, cramped and hurried, the signature of a man who had been desperate and hadn't thought it through. "This isn't a marriage contract," Clara said, reading carefully. "It's an agreement to arrange one, which is different." Calloway's eyes moved to her with something new in them. Reassessment. He hadn't expected her to read it, she realized. He had handed it to Nathaniel. He had not expected her to be the one who looked at it closely. "Technically," he said. "Technically is the only kind that matters in a legal document," she said. "This says my father agreed to pursue an arrangement. It doesn't bind me to anything. I wasn't a party to this agreement. My name is not on it." "You are the subject of it," Calloway said, and his voice had cooled several degrees. "I'm a person," Clara said, "not a subject." Calloway looked at Nathaniel. "You want to explain to her how these things work in practice?" "I think," Nathaniel said slowly, "she's explaining it to you." The two men behind Calloway shifted. Calloway himself was still smiling, but the smile had thinned. "This isn't finished," he said. "No," Nathaniel agreed. "But for today, on my property, with my guest standing beside me, it is." He moved toward the door and held it open in the plainest possible language. "Thank you for the courtesy call, Calloway." Calloway looked at Clara one more time. The look was long and deliberate, the kind that was meant to make her feel like a door he intended to open eventually, with or without a key. She looked back at him without flinching. He left. The door closed. Clara let out the breath she had been holding for approximately 4 minutes, and put one hand on the back of the nearest chair. "Are you all right?" Nathaniel asked. "Ask me in a moment," she said. Samuel's voice came from the top of the stairs. "Is he gone?" Nathaniel looked up. "Get back to bed, Samuel." "It's the middle of the day." "Then get back to your studies." A pause, then footsteps retreating, with all the enthusiasm of someone who had lost an argument they'd known from the start they wouldn't win. Clara steadied herself and let go of the chair. "The document," she said. "How bad is it actually?" "Bad enough," Nathaniel said. "Not fatal, but bad." He moved to the window, looked out, came back. He was burning through something internally. She could see it. The controlled energy of a man who does his anger quietly. "Your father sold the same debt to 3 different people. Calloway, me, and I suspect at least one other I don't know about yet." "He panicked," she said. "He was greedy," Nathaniel said. "Panic and greed look the same from the outside." She couldn't argue with that. "What does Calloway actually want?" she asked. "Not the document, not even the land. What does he want?" Nathaniel was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "He wants to be the man who has everything in this county. The water access, the acreage, the standing. And he's decided that the fastest route to all of it runs through this property." He looked at her. "And now, through you." "Because if he marries me, even if the contract doesn't bind me, it creates a public claim." "It creates a story," Nathaniel said. "And in small country, the story is often more powerful than the law." Clara sat down. She sat down because she needed to think, and she thought better when she wasn't using energy to stand up straight. "He's going to go to town," she said slowly. "He's going to tell everyone that my father made him a promise, that I'm here under false pretenses, that you—" She stopped. "That I took what was his," Nathaniel said flatly. "Yes." "He'll do it quickly," Nathaniel said, "before we can counter it." "Then we counter it first," Clara said. Nathaniel looked at her. "What are you suggesting?" She looked up at him. I'm suggesting we don't wait for him to write the story. We write it ourselves. She straightened in the chair. What's the truth? The actual truth. The one that doesn't benefit him. The truth is that I redeemed a debt legally. That you came here as a free person. That there is no prior claim on you that constitutes a binding obligation. Then we say that, she said, publicly, clearly, before he gets to say his version. That means going into town, he said. Standing in front of people who are already talking? I know what it means, she said. He studied her for a long moment. You're not afraid. I didn't say that, she said. I said I know what it means. She met his eyes. There's a difference, Mr. Hale. And something changed in his expression then. Not dramatically, not in the way things change in stories where everyone announces their feelings at the right moment. It was quieter than that. The shift of a man who has been carrying something alone for a very long time and has just noticed, for the first time, that there is someone standing beside him who is not going to walk away. He didn't say anything. He didn't need to. But May, who had apparently been listening from the kitchen doorway for the last several minutes, with a dish towel in her hands and no apology for it, said, "The cornbread's going to burn," and walked back into the kitchen, which was as close as May ever came to giving her blessing on anything. Samuel appeared at the bottom of the stairs. He looked at Clara. He looked at his father. He read the room the way he always read rooms, quickly, thoroughly, accurately. "Are we fighting Calloway?" he asked. "Samuel," his father started. "Because if we are," Samuel said seriously, "I think we should. He's a bad man. He looks at everything like it already belongs to him." Clara looked at this 10-year-old boy with his father's dark eyes and his own particular brand of clear-sighted courage, and she felt something in her chest that she did not yet have a word for. "We are," she told him, "but we're doing it the right way." Samuel considered this, nodded. "All right," he said. And Clara thought, there is that word again. All right. The Hale family word for everything that was too complicated to say properly, but too important to leave unsaid. She was beginning to think she belonged to it. That was the thought that frightened her, if she was honest. Not Calloway, not the document, not the town's whispers. It was this, the feeling of a door opening inside her that she had been certain for years was sealed shut. The terrifying, unasked-for possibility that she had not ended up in a place that would tolerate her. She had ended up in a place that wanted her there, and she did not yet know what to do with that, except to hold it carefully and not let anyone see how much it cost her just to hope it was real. They went into Hadley's Creek the next morning. Nathaniel had not asked her if she was sure. She appreciated that more than she could say. The absence of the question. The simple assumption that when she said she was going to do something, she had already done the work of deciding it. It was a small thing, the kind of thing that shouldn't have mattered as much as it did. But Clara had spent 19 years in a house where every decision she made was followed immediately by someone asking whether she'd really thought it through. And the silence where that question wasn't asked felt like oxygen. Gideon drove them. May stayed at the ridge with Samuel, who had argued for coming along with the focused intensity of a boy who understands that significant things are happening and has been told he cannot be part of them. May had settled the argument by handing him a pail and pointing at the garden, which was its own kind of eloquence. The ride into town was quiet. Not uncomfortable quiet, the kind that had begun to feel natural between them, the kind that meant neither of them needed to fill the air to prove they were present. "When we get there," Nathaniel said, halfway along the road, "let me speak first." "All right," she said. "Not because I don't trust what you'd say," he added, "but because Calloway's already framed this as something I've done to you. If you speak first, they'll say I told you to." Clara thought about it. "And if you speak first?" "They'll hear it from the one they've already decided is the problem," he said. and then they'll hear you confirm it in your own words. That's harder to dismiss. She looked at him. You've thought about this. I've had a long night, he said. She had heard him, in fact. Heard him moving around downstairs in the early hours. The sound of a chair. The soft thud of a book being set on a table. She had lain awake listening and had not gone down, because there are some kinds of thinking that need to be done alone, and she had learned to recognize when a person was in the middle of that kind. Nathaniel, she said, and it was the first time she had used his given name, and they both noticed it, and neither of them said anything about it, which felt like the right choice. Whatever happens in there, I need you to know that I'm not afraid of what they think of me. He looked at her. I was afraid of it my whole life, she said. In that house, I organized myself around it. What the neighbors would say, what the family would think, whether being sick had made me into something shameful. She pressed her hands flat on her knees, the way she always did when she was being honest about something that cost her. I don't have the energy for it anymore. I'm not performing for anyone today. He was quiet for a moment. Then, good, he said. Neither am I. Hadley's Creek on a Thursday morning was not empty. That was the thing about small frontier towns. There was always someone available to witness whatever you didn't want witnessed. The general store had 3 women out front when the wagon pulled up. The farrier, across the way, stopped what he was doing. 2 men outside the tavern turned to look. Nathaniel stepped down and offered Clara his hand, and she took it, and they walked into the general store together, with the combined, unhurried energy of people who have nothing to hide and know it. The storekeeper, a thin man named Hargrove, who Clara had met once before, and who had the cautious disposition of someone who survived in small towns by never committing firmly to any position, looked at them with wide eyes and then rapidly rearranged his face into something more neutral. Mr. Hale, he said. Miss Whitmore. Hargrove, Nathaniel said. He did not lower his voice. I'm going to say something, and I'd be grateful if you passed it along, since I understand there's been some confusion about my situation at the Ridge. The women near the door had gone very still. The farrier had appeared in the doorway. This was, Clara understood, exactly what Nathaniel had intended. Miss Whitmore came to Hale Ridge as a free woman, Nathaniel said clearly. She was not purchased. She was not coerced. Her family was in financial difficulty, and I resolved a legal debt. She chose to stay. She is a guest in my home, and she is under my protection. And anyone who has questions about that arrangement is welcome to bring them to me directly. He paused. Instead of to Richard Calloway. The silence was thorough. Hargrove looked at Clara. She could see the question in his face, the need for confirmation, the slightly desperate hope that she would make this simple for him. Every word of that is true, she said. I am exactly where I choose to be. One of the women near the door, older, with the settled authority of someone who had been in this town since before most of the buildings, said, Calloway came through yesterday saying you were... that the situation was... I know what he said, Clara said. He said it to my face, too. She met the woman's eyes. He was wrong. And I think, ma'am, that you probably suspected as much, or you wouldn't be asking. The woman looked at her for a long moment. Then something in her face shifted, the particular shift of a person who has been waiting for permission to believe the more decent version of a story. Calloway's been buying up land since his wife died, the woman said, and her voice had changed. Less guarded, more conversational. The voice of someone who has decided to be on a side. Nobody much liked the way he did it, pressuring old Matthias Henderson into selling that business with the Cooper property. She clicked her tongue. I don't suppose any of us were surprised when he set his sights on your land, Nathaniel. He hasn't gotten it yet, Nathaniel said. No, the woman said, looking at Clara with something that was almost approval. I don't suppose he has. They bought May's supplies. 3 people said good morning to Clara on the way out, who had looked through her like glass the last time she'd been in town, and she accepted it with equal parts gratitude and wariness, because she understood that public opinion was a tide, and tides went both directions. What she did not expect was Calloway himself. He was waiting outside. Not alone. He had 2 men with him, different ones from the visit to the ridge, and he had the studied casualness of a man who had calculated exactly how this moment would look. He tipped his hat to Clara with elaborate courtesy, which she found more threatening than anything he'd done before. Miss Whitmore, he said. And Nathaniel, what a coincidence. It isn't, though, Nathaniel said. No, Calloway agreed pleasantly. It isn't. He looked at Clara. I hope you're finding the ridge comfortable. I understand it can be isolating for a young woman without family nearby. I have everything I need, she said. For now, he said, and the 2 words landed like a blade set quietly on a table. No drama, just the clear indication that it was there. He reached into his coat. I've taken the liberty of sending a rider to your father, Miss Whitmore. Given the legal complexities of your situation, I thought it appropriate to involve the family. Clara kept her face still. My father has no authority over me. He has a signature on a contract that predates your arrangement with Nathaniel, Calloway said. That's not authority. That's law. A contract I wasn't party to, she said, which any judge in this territory would note. Calloway's smile held, but his eyes had gone cold and flat, the eyes of a man who does not enjoy being answered back and is deciding what to do about it. Judges are appointed, Miss Whitmore, and appointments are made by men with influence. He said it lightly, the way you say something you want someone to hear without having to defend. Are you threatening a federal legal process in the middle of the street? Nathaniel said. His voice was very quiet. That was the thing about quiet. It carried better than volume when the person using it had weight behind it. I'm sharing information, Calloway said. Then I'll share some back, Nathaniel said. I have documentation of every financial transaction between myself and Edward Whitmore, witnessed and recorded. I have a letter from my solicitor in Philadelphia confirming the legality of my arrangement. And I have, he looked at Calloway steadily, considerably more patience than you're counting on. A muscle moved in Calloway's jaw. This isn't over, he said. You keep saying that, Nathaniel said. One day, it'll stop being true. Calloway looked at Clara one last time, and what she saw in his face then was not anger. It was something more dangerous. The cold recalibration of a man who has decided to change his approach rather than his goal. He left. His men followed. Gideon, who had been loading the wagon with the focused attention of a man pretending not to listen to anything, said quietly, without turning around, He's going to come at it from a different direction. I know, Nathaniel said. He's got men who owe him, Gideon said. He'll find a way to make something happen that can't be handled in a public street. I know that too, Nathaniel said. Clara looked at him. What do we do? We go home, he said. And we think. She climbed back into the wagon, and as Gideon turned the horses back toward the ridge, she looked at the town behind them and thought about Calloway's face in that last moment. Not the anger, not the threat, but the recalibration. And she felt the certainty settle into her bones that whatever came next was going to come fast. She was right. It came that same evening, just before supper. And it did not come from the direction she expected. It came from her father. Edward Whitmore arrived at Hale Ridge in a hired carriage, with a worn, careful look of a man who has rehearsed what he is going to say so many times he's no longer sure he believes it. He had aged, not dramatically, not in the way illness ages a person, but in the specific way that guilt ages a face when the person wearing it isn't quite willing to call it guilt. Clara saw him from the upstairs window and sat very still for a moment. Then she went downstairs. He was in the front room. Nathaniel was standing. Her father was sitting, which told her something about how the first 60 seconds of that meeting had gone. "Clara," her father said. "Father," she said. He looked at her the way people look at things they have broken and cannot entirely face. Quickly, then away. "You look well." "I am well," she said. "Why are you here?" He pressed his hands together. "Calloway contacted me. He made certain representations about the legality of the situation. He said there could be serious consequences for the family if I didn't—" He stopped, started again. "He told me that if I came here, if I asked you to come home, that he would consider the prior agreement settled." The room was very quiet. "He sent you," Clara said. "I came of my own—" "He sent you," she said again. Not angry, just precise. "He couldn't move me publicly, so he sent the one person he thought I'd have trouble saying no to." She looked at her father's face and felt something she had not expected. Not rage, not grief, but a kind of tired clarity, like looking at a sum that is finally resolved to a number you can work with. "Did he pay for the carriage?" Her father's silence was its own answer. "Edward," Nathaniel said, and his voice was not unkind, which surprised Clara slightly. "You understand what Calloway is doing." "I understand that I'm in a difficult—" "He is using you," Nathaniel said, "the same way he uses everyone. He found the point of pressure, and he pressed it." He moved to stand beside Clara. "Your daughter is not going back to your house. She is not going to Calloway. The arrangement I made is legal, and it stands." "The prior contract," her father started. "Is not binding on her," Clara said. "I've read it. My name isn't on it. I was not a party to it. Whatever you signed, Father, you signed for yourself, not for me." She paused. "You never had the right to sign for me. You just believed you did." Her father looked at his hands. He had the expression of a man arriving at the edge of a recognition he has been avoiding for some time. "Clara," he said quietly, I want you to know that I did not intend—" "I know what you intended," she said. "You intended to solve a problem. I was the most convenient solution. I'm not saying you wanted to hurt me." She said it steadily. "I'm saying you didn't think about whether you would, because thinking about it would have made things harder for you. And I have spent a year being angry about that, and I am finished with it now, because it costs me more than it costs you." Her father looked up. "I don't hate you," she said. "I want that to be clear. I don't hate you, and I don't need an apology, because I've stopped needing things from you that you don't know how to give." She held his gaze. "But I am not going with you. And I am not going to Calloway. And if you go back and tell him that, you'll be doing the most honest thing you've done in several years." Edward Whitmore sat very still. Then, slowly, something seemed to go out of him. The rehearsed posture, the defensive set of his jaw. What was left was just a tired man, older than she'd remembered, sitting in someone else's house. "He has lawyers," her father said. "Real ones. He said he could make this messy." "He can try," Nathaniel said. "My solicitor is better." "He has influence in town." Less than he did this morning, Nathaniel said. Her father looked at Clara. Are you safe here? She heard the question underneath the question. He was asking whether he had done something unforgivable. She thought he probably deserved the ambiguity of not being sure. I am safer here, she said, than I have ever been anywhere else. He nodded slowly. He stood up. He did not try to embrace her, which was the right decision. I'll tell him it's settled, he said, for whatever that's worth. Thank you, she said. He left. Gideon helped him back to the hired carriage without being asked, which was Gideon's way of managing a situation with maximum efficiency and minimum conversation. The door closed. Clara stood in the middle of the room and breathed. Are you all right? Nathaniel asked. Ask me in a moment, she said. It was what she always said, and she saw him recognize it, and the fact that he recognized it meant something she didn't examine too closely. He'll be back, she said, when the moment had passed. Calloway, not my father. Calloway. Yes, Nathaniel said, and next time it won't be a street conversation or a carriage visit. No, he agreed. Next time it'll be something that forces a decision. She turned to look at him. Then we need to be ready before next time. He nodded, and she could see him working through it. The legal pieces, the practical pieces, the pieces that had to do with the ridge and the land and everything he'd built and wasn't willing to lose. Then Samuel appeared in the doorway. He had clearly been listening from the hallway. He had the expression of a child who knows he's been caught and has decided that the information was worth the consequence. Was that your father? He asked Clara. It was, she said. Did you send him away? I did. Samuel thought about this. Good, he said, with the simple finality of a 10-year-old who has made a moral judgment and feels no need to elaborate. But then he looked at his father, and his voice dropped slightly, and he said, Papa, Calloway's man was on the east fence line again this morning. I saw him from the upper field. He was measuring. The room went absolutely still. Nathaniel's face changed. Not dramatically. It wasn't a face that did things dramatically. But Clara had learned to read the small shifts, the stillness that meant something underneath had moved. How long was he there? Nathaniel asked. Long enough, Samuel said. He had paper. He was writing things down. Nathaniel looked at Clara. She looked back at him. Calloway wasn't waiting for legal maneuvering. He was already moving on the ground, already behaving as though the property were his, already establishing a presence that would take on the quality of a claim simply by being repeated enough times in enough visible ways. He was not coming at them from a new direction. He was coming from all directions at once. And he had timed it. She understood this now with cold certainty, so that the legal pressure and the social pressure and the family pressure all landed within the same few days, close enough together that there would be no breathing room between them, no chance to resolve one before the next arrived. She looked at Nathaniel, and she said very quietly, He planned this. Yes, Nathaniel said. All of it. My father, the town, the fence line. This was always the plan. Yes. He was never going to negotiate. No, Nathaniel said. He was never going to negotiate. She nodded once, and the thing that moved through her then was not fear. She checked. She was honest with herself about checking, and it was not fear. It was something sharper and more useful than fear. It was the absolute, settled decision of a woman who has been underestimated her entire life and has finally found a situation that deserves everything she has. Then we stop waiting for his next move, she said. Nathaniel looked at her steadily. We make one of our own, she said. The move they made was not what Calloway expected, which was precisely why it worked. Nathaniel rode out at dawn the next morning, not to town, not to confront anyone, but to 3 specific properties along the eastern edge of the county. Clara knew because she was awake when he left, and she knew because he had told her the night before, sitting at the kitchen table long after May and Samuel had gone to bed, laying out the pieces of it the way a man lays out tools before a job. Careful, deliberate, nothing wasted. "Calloway's been buying land piece by piece," he had said, "but he hasn't been paying fairly for any of it. Matthias Henderson, the Cooper family, old Gerald Price on the North Ridge." He looked at her. They all sold because they felt they had no choice, because Calloway made himself look inevitable. "And if they knew he wasn't," Clara said, "if they knew someone was willing to stand against him, that it was possible to stand against him, they might be willing to say publicly what they've only said in private." "Witnesses," she said. "Witnesses," he confirmed, "to his methods, to the pressure he applied, to the gap between what he offered them and what the land was worth." He paused. "Calloway's built his position on people believing he's untouchable. The moment that belief cracks, everything he's built on top of it gets a lot less stable." Clara had thought about it through the night, about her father's face when he said Calloway had lawyers, about the measuring man on the fence line, about the way Calloway smiled, always smiling, always pleasant, the pleasantness of a man who has never yet encountered a situation he couldn't outlast. "What do you need me to do?" she had asked. And he had told her, which was why, while Nathaniel rode east, Clara walked into May's kitchen at first light and said, "I need to write 3 letters." May put coffee in front of her without being asked and went to find paper. The letters were to the wives, not the men, the wives. Clara had learned this from her own house, from years of watching her mother be the actual architecture of everything her father presented as his own decision. The women in frontier households were the ones who remembered details, who kept records in their heads because no one ever gave them a ledger, who understood the precise difference between what their husbands had been promised and what they had received. She wrote to Mrs. Henderson, to Mrs. Cooper, to Agnes Price, whom May had mentioned once in passing as a woman of considerable sharpness and very little patience for injustice. She wrote plainly. She did not ask for favors. She told them what Calloway was attempting, and she told them that if they had anything to say about his methods, she and Nathaniel Hale were prepared to listen and to act on what they heard. She signed each letter with her full name, Clara Whitmore, not Miss, not the Whitmore girl. Her name, in full, without apology. Gideon rode them out before 8 in the morning. May watched him go, and then looked at Clara with the expression she used when something impressed her, but she didn't intend to make a fuss about it. "Those women will talk," May said. "That's what I'm counting on," Clara said. Samuel came downstairs, read the mood of the kitchen accurately, and sat down and ate his breakfast without asking a single question, which was either remarkable self-discipline or proof that he understood more than he let on. Clara suspected both. The response came faster than she expected. Agnes Price arrived at Hale Ridge before noon, in her own wagon, driving it herself, with the expression of a woman who has been waiting for an invitation to say something for quite some time. She was perhaps 60, iron-haired, with hands that had done real work and eyes that had seen real things. And she sat down at May's kitchen table and said, "I have a copy of the original offer Calloway made my husband, the one before the real offer, the one he made to show Gerald what would happen if he refused." Clara sat very still. "You kept it." "I keep everything," Agnes said. "My husband said I was foolish. I told him a woman who doesn't keep records doesn't have any." She set a folded paper on the table. "Calloway threatened Gerald's water rights, told him he'd bought the upstream land and could divert the creek anytime he wanted. It was a lie. He didn't own it yet, but Gerald didn't know that. Coercion, Clara said. Coercion, Agnes confirmed. Plain and ugly. She looked at Clara directly. Your letter said you were prepared to act. I need to know what that means before I commit to anything. It means taking this to the county magistrate, Clara said. Nathaniel has a solicitor in Philadelphia. If we have documented evidence of coercion, it changes the legal picture considerably. Calloway's prior claim on the Whitmore contract looks very different if it's established that he conducts his business through threats. Agnes looked at her for a long moment. You're 19 years old, she said. I am, Clara said. You've been here 3 weeks. Closer to 4. Agnes made a sound that was not quite a laugh, but was adjacent to it. All right, she said. What else do you need? By the time Nathaniel returned in the late afternoon, there were 2 more women at the kitchen table. Mrs. Cooper had arrived an hour after Agnes, younger, more nervous, but with her own set of records. Letters Calloway had sent to her husband, carefully worded threats dressed as offers. And the older Henderson woman had sent her son with a signed statement that Gerald Price wasn't the only one who had been presented with consequences for refusing Calloway's first price. Nathaniel stood in the kitchen doorway and looked at the table and at the 4 women sitting around it, and at May refilling coffee with the quiet satisfaction of a woman who has seen something go right. He looked at Clara. She looked back at him. I see you've been busy, he said. You told me to make a move, she said. Something in his face, that particular controlled stillness, shifted in the way she had come to recognize as the most honest thing he did. Not a smile, not quite. Something more like relief, the expression of a man who has been holding a wall alone for a very long time and has just felt someone else put their shoulder against it. I'll send a rider to Philadelphia tonight, he said. Already drafted the letter, she said. May has it. May produced the letter from her apron pocket with the air of a woman who finds all of this entirely unremarkable. Nathaniel took it, read it, looked up. You wrote this yourself? I did. It's better than what I would have written. I know, she said, and she said it without false modesty, because false modesty was something she had left behind in her father's house, along with everything else she didn't need anymore. That night, for the first time since Clara had arrived at Hale Ridge, supper felt different. Not lighter, exactly. The situation was not light, and none of them were the kind of people who pretended things were resolved before they were. But there was something at the table that hadn't been there before. Something that had to do with direction, with all of them facing the same way. Samuel said, Are we going to win? Nathaniel said, We're going to try. Samuel looked at Clara. What do you think? She looked at this boy, this watchful, careful, clear-eyed boy, who had learned too early that the world was not always what it should be, and who had not let that make him bitter. I think Calloway made a mistake, she said. He looked at this house and saw something he could take apart. He didn't understand what it was actually made of. Samuel considered this. What is it made of? She held his gaze. People who don't quit, she said. He nodded, satisfied, and went back to his supper. And Nathaniel looked at his plate and said nothing. And Clara thought that nothing was exactly the right response. The magistrate came 12 days later. Calloway came the day before. He came alone this time, which surprised her, and he came in the early morning, and he looked like a man who has run several calculations overnight and arrived at a number he doesn't like. The 2 men he usually brought with him were absent. The horse he rode was his own good one, not the showy one. Small signals, but she had learned to read small signals. Nathaniel met him outside. Clara stood on the porch. She had not been asked to stay inside, and she did not. "I know about the magistrate," Calloway said, without preamble. He was looking at Nathaniel, but he was aware of Clara. She could tell by the angle of his shoulders. "Then you know what he'll find," Nathaniel said. "I know what you think he'll find." Calloway's voice was steady, but there was something underneath it. The first time she had heard anything underneath it. Pressure, she thought. He was feeling pressure for the first time, and it was changing the timbre of everything. "Those women's statements, the price document. I want to know what you intend to do with them." "Everything that's appropriate," Nathaniel said. "Nathaniel," Calloway's jaw tightened. "I'm offering you a chance to settle this privately." "You've been offering things privately since before Miss Whitmore arrived," Nathaniel said. "I've declined each time." "This offer is different." Calloway looked at him steadily. "I'll withdraw the prior contract claim entirely. I'll put it in writing. I'll record it at the county office." A pause. "In exchange for those documents and those statements staying out of the magistrate's hands." Clara felt a shift in the air. This was real. He was actually offering something real, which meant the documents were more damaging than even Agnes Price had understood. She watched Nathaniel's face. She watched him think. Not the quick surface thinking of a man deciding what to say, but the deeper kind. The kind that involved cost-benefit at a level that included things you couldn't put numbers on. He looked at Clara. Not for permission, not for rescue. He looked at her the way you look at someone whose judgment you have come to trust, asking not what she would decide, but whether she saw anything he had missed. She thought about what Calloway was offering. She thought about what the magistrate's visit would cost in time and attention and the grinding exposure of a legal process. She thought about Samuel, who did not need any more disruption in his life. She thought about the women who had come to this table and what they had risked by doing so. She shook her head slightly. Just once. Just enough. Nathaniel turned back to Calloway. "No," he said. Calloway stared at him. "You're turning this down." "I'm turning it down," Nathaniel said. "Because in 2 years, you'll find another angle, another pressure point, another document, and I'll be back in the same position. The only way this ends is in front of a magistrate, on the record, where it can't be quietly reversed the moment I look away." "This will cost you," Calloway said. "The process, the legal fees, the attention. It'll cost me less than leaving you operational," Nathaniel said. Calloway looked at Clara then, directly, for the last time. "This was your advice," he said. "It was his decision," she said. "Same as it was yours when you started all of this." He held her gaze for a long moment. She had the sense of a man trying to find a way through a door that has no handle on his side. He turned his horse and left. The magistrate arrived the next morning and spent the better part of 2 days at Hale Ridge and at properties across the county, reviewing documents, taking statements, listening to Agnes Price with the attentiveness of a man who knows when he is hearing someone say something important. Clara was present for all of it, not as a witness, not initially, as Nathaniel's recorder, sitting at his right hand with pen and paper, documenting everything, every statement and every question and every answer. Because she had a precise memory, and she wrote quickly, and the magistrate, who was a practical man, had looked at her on the first day and said, "You write faster than my clerk," and she had said, "Then let me be useful," and he had not objected. On the 3rd day, the magistrate ruled. The prior contract, her father's agreement with Calloway, was found to be unenforceable on 2 grounds. First, that Clara had not been a party to it and could not be bound by it. And second, that the agreement itself had been made under documented coercive conditions that Calloway had applied to multiple parties in the county, which constituted a pattern of conduct that undermined the validity of his business dealings broadly. He did not lose everything that day. That was not how the law worked, and Clara understood that. But he lost the claim on her. He lost the social story he had been building. And he lost, most significantly, the appearance of inevitability, the sense that Richard Calloway always got what he wanted in the end, and resistance was simply a delay. He did not come to Hale Ridge again. It was a week after the magistrate left that Nathaniel found her in the small room off the hallway, the one she had made her own, the one where she read and wrote and thought and was not required to be useful to anyone unless she chose to be. He stood in the doorway. She looked up. "I want to ask you something," he said, "and I want you to know before I ask it that whatever your answer is, nothing changes. Your room is your room. Your place here is your place. I'm not asking this as, it's not a condition." She set down her pen. "Ask it," she said. He looked at her the way he had looked at her outside when Calloway made his final offer. The direct, unguarded look of a man who has decided that honesty is the only thing worth spending. "I would like you to stay," he said. "Not as a guest, not under protection, as a partner in this place. Someone who is here because she chooses to be here, with full understanding of what here is and what it asks." He paused. "I am not an easy man. This is not an easy life. Samuel is—" He stopped. Started again. "Samuel calls you Miss Clara, and last week he told May that he thought you were the smartest person on the property, and May agreed with him, which, from May, is approximately equivalent to a citation from the president." Clara felt something move through her that she did not try to stop or qualify. "I know what this place is," she said. "I know you do," he said. "That's why I'm asking." She stood up. She crossed the room and she stood in front of him, and she looked at him, this complicated, quiet, immovable man who had pulled her out of a life that was trying to erase her, not because she was easy to help or convenient to save, but because it was the right thing to do, and he was a man who did right things even when they cost him. "I already chose," she said. "Weeks ago. I just wasn't ready to say it out loud." He looked at her. "And now?" "And now I'm saying it," she said. "Yes, Nathaniel, I'll stay." Something broke open in his face, not dramatically, not the way things happen in stories told by people who have never felt the real version. Quietly, the way a room feels when a window is opened after a long winter. Just light and air and the simple, staggering fact of both. He reached out and took her hand. Not grandly, just held it, the way you hold something you intend to keep. "All right," he said. "All right," she said. It was Samuel who made it real, the way children always make the important things real by treating them as facts before the adults have finished deciding. He came into the hallway 3 minutes later, with the bearing of a boy who has also been listening from the stairs, and has decided this time the information was worth 2 consequences. And he looked at their joined hands, and then up at both of their faces, and he said, "Good. May said it would happen eventually. I told her I thought so too." Clara looked down at him. "How long have you thought so?" He considered. "Since the first morning you argued with my father at breakfast, and he didn't tell you to stop," he said. "That's when I knew." Nathaniel said, "Samuel." "I'm going," Samuel said, already retreating toward the kitchen, where May could be heard doing something emphatic with a pot. "May's making cornbread." "It's not Wednesday," Clara called after him. "She said some things deserve cornbread on any day," Samuel called back. Clara looked at Nathaniel. Nathaniel looked at Clara. And in the particular silence between them, the one they had built together, piece by piece, from the wreckage of things that had tried to reduce them both. Something settled permanently into place. She had come to Hale Ridge as a debt paid, a problem solved. A daughter her family had decided cost more than she was worth. She had arrived with one trunk and the quiet, stubborn conviction that she was still, despite everything, a person worth reckoning with. She had been right. Not because Nathaniel Hale had rescued her. She had done too much of her own rescuing for that story to be true. But because this place, these people, this improbable and difficult and quietly extraordinary life had looked at her, all of her, the fever-scarred parts and the sharp-tongued parts, and the parts that had learned to grieve without making a sound, and had said without hesitation, "Yes, you, stay." Clara Whitmore had spent 19 years being told what she was worth by people who had never once asked her what she thought. She had answered the question herself, in a frontier house in a Pennsylvania summer, with a man who listened, and a boy who watched, and an old woman who made cornbread on the wrong day, just to say that something mattered. And the answer, it turned out, was more than enough.